This webinar is provided by Washington Hands and Voices with funding through the Washington State Department of Health EDDI program, which stands for Early Hearing Detection, Diagnosis, and Intervention. So I want to thank them for allowing us to do this. We are a parent-led organization that's founded on the concept that we provide information and support to families across all communications in our state. We believe that all children can achieve their highest potential with the encouragement and advocacy from their families. The purpose of these webinars is to provide knowledge to families in order to increase well-being and confidence, ensuring family involvement and leadership when supporting their deaf, blind, or hard of hearing child. Such involvement is cornerstone to increased child outcomes. So it looks like we have a fair amount of people from all around the state. Again, I want to welcome you all. All right. So let's begin. I want to introduce Harold Johnson, who is a colleague of mine as well as many in our area. So Harold Johnson is a former professor of special education at Michigan State University and Kent State University. He has worked as a teacher, school administrator, and university professor in deaf education since 1971. His work has focused on reducing isolation, recognizing excellence, and facilitating collaboration among parents and professionals. His work has created a collaborative effort, which includes the deaf education website, www.deafed.net. And in 2006, Dr. Johnson, in collaboration with colleagues across the nation, such as Hands and Voices, the Association of College Educators, Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and the Council for Exceptional Children, the Division for Communication Disabilities and Deafness, has worked to understand and prevent abuse of children with disabilities via the Our Children Project. There's more information on our Washington Hands and Voices as well as website, as well as the National Hands and Voices website as well. So welcome, Harold.
Thank you very much, Christine. And thank you all for being with us today. This presentation is part of the Hands and Voices Our Children Project. Sarah Kennedy, also on the screen, who's monitoring the chat box, and Christine are both members of that particular project. The project did begin in 2009 with Hands and Voices, and it began with a focus simply on being aware of the problem, of how frequently our kids with exceptionalities, particularly those who are deaf and hard of hearing, were in fact experiencing maltreatment. From there, we moved on to being able to better observe and report. And now we're really focusing upon how to prevent and then to respond to kids that have experienced maltreatment. Today's presentation is going to focus particularly upon Birth-3, that is infants and toddlers. And what we hope to do is to give parents particularly, but as well as those professionals who work with them, the resources and knowledge and skills that you need to be effective enhancing the safety and success of your children. Please do feel free to post questions or comments in a chat box. As Christine mentioned, Sarah Kennedy will be monitoring those, and we'll try then to answer your questions, particularly at the end, but throughout the presentation as well. You already work to enhance the safety of your kids. You use car seats. You give them healthy foods. You put them to sleep in safe beds. You prevent them from falling. You maybe even teach them how to swim. You also are careful whenever they're around a new pet. You try to prevent them from getting shocked by putting in those nice covers of electrical outlets. You try to help make sure they don't get burned, and then so much more, right? I mean, it's like a constant alert where you're trying to child-proof your house, and you're realizing that it's almost an impossibility, so you're constantly on the lookout. Well, today we're going to be adding another element to that, and we're going to be talking about people safety. This actually is a term that I first read about from Kid Power that we'll be talking more about later on. But in Kid Power, in people safety, what we're talking about is also to ensure that the people who care for your kids, the people who you trust to be alone with your kids, that they really have the well-being of your kids at heart. And this is critical because from birth to 3 is a point where kids are most vulnerable. You know, think about it. The more dependent kids are upon their caregivers, their parents, for their mobility, for their clothing, for food. The more dependent they are, and also the more isolated they are, and the fewer communication skills they have, the more at risk they are for child abuse and neglect. In fact, children birth to 3 experience the greatest incidence of child abuse and neglect of any other population of kids. That's why we're talking about this population today. Also, a tough thing to realize is that when someone hurts our kids, they're usually not strangers. 88 to 90% of the time, there's someone that is both known and trusted by the family, be they another adult, be they an older child, it could be a neighbor, it could be, you know, a spouse, it could be a boyfriend, it could be, you know, the child caregiver. But so when we talk about, you know, people safety, we're primarily talking about safety of the people who you trust and depend upon to care for your kid. Stranger danger is a reality, but it's about 8% of the reality. So the vast majority of the time, we have to be most careful about the people that we know and we trust. So this presentation will help you to give your kids the knowledge and skills that they need to communicate their safety needs, but also then for you then to actually to determine who you should trust with your children. And note that because of our kids with exceptionalities, because of their communication challenges, possibly their mobility problems, a whole range of things that are our kids, it makes them increasingly vulnerable for the risk of maltreatment. In this presentation, really there are going to be 3 steps we're going to talk about. The first one is how to observe your child in such a way that you can effectively decode or share what they do and how they do and what it means with other people that interact with your children. So it's about observing. Second step is encouraging your child to develop those language skills that make them safer, particularly the language skills around emotions, about saying no, about parts of their body. And then third, we will talk about, again, how to determine people that you trust with your children. In addition, we'll talk about how this knowledge and these resources can also be incorporated into individual family service plans and IEP documents. Parents as observers, parents in this group today, you spend more time with your child than anyone else. You see them in all kinds of situations, from whether eating, you're bathing, you're changing them, you're just playing with them, you're watching as they kind of explore the world. So you have both the most opportunity and the best context to observe your children, and that's a critical skill that we're going to be building upon. To aid us in our work, and hopefully our system will work here, let me pull it up, but the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has just recently developed the Milestone Tracker app. And what this app allows you to do is to download to your phone, be it an iPhone or an Android phone, all the information about what your child does, how they are developing, and how you as a parent can nurture them. And it's available in both English and Spanish, and it can be downloaded to your phone. Let's see if this works. Quickly pull this up. Yeah, great. So this actually is the CDC website. This is the app. It's just a matter of downloading. It's very, very simple. And we're going to be talking about this app. What I'm going to be asking you to consider doing is actually to, not right now, but after the presentation, to download this app to your phone. Or if you don't have a phone, you also then can simply go to a PDF copy of the information, and maybe with someone's help, print it out so that you have all the information available, and you then you can refer to it that way. Okay, great. So this information is going to be building on what the CDC has developed for us, and let me kind of share with you some of that information. The essential features of the app is that you can put the name of your child in, the date of birth, all the basic information. The milestones, it actually will show you what the children do at 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, up to 5 years of age. It's really cool. It also gives you short videos and pictures actually of kids doing those things that they talk about. It will give you activities that you can do to further nurture your child's development. It will tell you when maybe you should think about talking to a professional, such as your physician or your early intervention specialist. It'll help you keep track of all your appointments that you have with your children. And then finally, to be able to share then these milestone summaries, you know, with the people that are caring for your child. It's a remarkable document that it does. So this is an example at 9 months. So take a minute just to kind of look at that. So at 9 months, it's telling you what the children will be doing as far as their social and emotional reality, their language and communication skills, their learning, and their physical development. It does this for every age that the kids are going through. So I know as a parent, you know I did anyway, I was constantly wondering, is he doing what he should be doing? You know, do I know what I need to know? And many times parents, if you have a child with exceptionality, it's particularly tough sometimes just to trust your knowledge, trust, you know, your beliefs, what you know. So the CDC milestone checklist is really a good reminder about, you know, what your children might be developing a little earlier on time or maybe even a little bit later. In addition, it gives you things that you can do with your child to further nurture their development, to further, you know, aid to them learning language, and just to really to enjoy being with them. And then also, the part I mentioned to you before, that it also gives you the ability to actually see videos of other kids doing those things with their children. So, you know, not only can you read about it, but you actually can see it. You can record how that is working out as far as your individual child. So really a nice developmental sequence for us to work on. But there's a difference here. You know that many of our kids, because, you know, of their hearing loss, because of additional exceptionalities, they're a little bit different. In fact, the CDC Milestone app does not include our kids. It doesn't include any kids with disabilities. So whereas the app will give you the what, the when, and the why of the developmental progression, it won't necessarily tell you how, particularly in terms of how our kids communicate, how they interact. So it's a good developmental milestone, but it doesn't really include kids with exceptionalities, certainly not our kids. And be it you communicating with them through speech, through signs, through cueing, or through a variety of those, the actual how of their communication won't be captured on the website. So as a parent of a child that has a hearing loss and possibly some other exceptionalities, your perspective of how your child communicates is really critical. And no one else really has that. And unfortunately, many of the individuals that you'll come in contact with will miss or misunderstand your child's communication attempts. And when that happens, the kid, you know, not only is the environment less responsive, but it really slows down the whole learning process. So the goal then is, what can we do to increase the ability of other individuals to recognize when your child is trying to communicate and help them to understand what your child is trying to communicate? So the focus really is upon the how. The CDC document gives us a nice progression, gives us nice videos, nice activities, but how your children actually communicate is different. So what I'm going to suggest is that you use the camera that's on your phone. And you know, this is iPhone 6, so it's a fairly old one, but even the flips, you know, most phones have cameras involved. But I'm going to ask that as a parent particularly, but also the early intervention specialist, that you use your phone to capture something new. When the kid begins to communicate something new, that you take a picture of it, and that you use then the developmental milestones provided by the CDC and the pictures to actually show them not only where your child is on the milestones, but also how they are communicating the information, okay? So it's critical that parents, because of unique knowledge, can help capture how their children actually communicate. Now, With the I'm sorry, it is CDC, not DCD. I just see that error on the PowerPoint there. The CDC milestones and your pictures can document your child's development of communication competence. In this case, pretty clear that this little boy doesn't want what's going to happen. So he not only understands no in this case, he's really saying, no, I don't want maybe a bath or have my teeth brushed or my hair cut. But so what you'll be doing then is using the CDC milestones and your pictures to document new and emerging communication skills on the part of your children. And the goal then is to increase the responsiveness of people in your child's environment, be it your husband, be it the caregiver, be it the teacher. Increase their responsiveness to your child by them being able then to effectively observe, understand, and then respond. The more responsive the environment is, the more nurturing the environment, the faster the child's development, and the safer the child is going to be as well. Okay. So again, what you want to create is a nurturing, responsive environment that understands the child's communication and communicates with them in a way that further encourages more behavior. It also will help you to recognize changes in a child's communication. Let's say, for example, the child's doing well, they're communicating, they're laughing, they're giggling, they're starting to say, or maybe it's a sign, bye-bye, or no, something like that. And then all of a sudden, after maybe being in daycare for a day, they come back and they're much quieter. They seem to be much more pensive. They seem to be looking around more. Maybe they even kind of shrink away from the caregiver at the child care place when you take them in next time. Because you are observing your child so well and you're noticing changes, you'll notice even more quickly changes in the child behavior that may indicate they've had negative experience. Okay? So critical skill, not only in terms of nurturing the child's development, but also then being aware of something has happened in a child's life that may in fact you need to be aware of and possibly act on for their safety. Now, so the first part is being able to effectively observe, document, and share how your child communicates with the aid of the CDC milestones and the camera on your iPhone. Okay. Next step of our work here is communication skills. That is, what can you do to enhance the communication skills of your kids to keep them safer? Well, you already know that having an infant or a toddler is full of joy and drama, like it indicates. There are times when the kids are happy, when they're sad, when they're angry. There are also times when they're sleepy, scared, and they're friendly. There are times when they're loving, they're surprised, they're upset. When they're hungry, and not hungry for that in particular. They're wearing their emotions on their face and their bodies all the time. There are also times when you just don't know. You're playing 20 questions. You're just trying to figure it out. And as a parent, you have the most experience, therefore probably the greatest probability of getting close to it anyway. But it's using their behaviors and then inferring the meaning. The child's safety is enhanced when they are able to use language to express how they're feeling. The CDC milestone tracker will give you indication of when they are, for example, like in the case of the 9-month-old, they may in fact be afraid of strangers. They may cling, to familiar adults. That's showing an emotion, right? You're getting a sense maybe that they're a little bit afraid, they're uneasy, they don't want to communicate, they don't want to go to that other person. So the goal now is going to be, what can we do to actually give them communication? Be they signs, be they speech, be they cueing, be they combination of all of those, so they can more effectively convey to you how are they feeling. In a lot of ways, it's just a matter of doing what you already are doing. That is, when you're playing with a kid, you're changing them, you're feeding them, you're cleaning them up. You're constantly talking to them, you're constantly communicating with them. You're constantly saying, oh, you got something on your cheek, or your tummy really is big today. So you're constantly using language to name things. Well, what I'm asking you that you do is that also you name their emotions. Oh, you really seem sleepy. Oh, are you hungry? Yeah, I know you're hungry, aren't you? So you use language to describe their emotions. And critically, number 2 there is that you also use language to describe your own emotions. Imagine, you're trying to comfort the baby. It's been a long day. You're tired. You give a big yawn. You go, oh, I'm feeling sleepy. I'm tired. So you're using language to not only describe the kid's behavior, their emotions, but also using language to describe your emotions. And because you're using the language in the context of them doing something, them seeing something, them feeling something, that's how that the kids gradually begin to figure it out. And then once the kid begins to communicate something that's pretty good enough, um, that you actually know they meant to say sorry or hungry or happy. And then of course you reinforce it and you model it in a more adult-like fashion. And that's how language occurs. But the key thing, guys, is that it's critical that you name the emotions that the kids are experiencing. And you name the emotions that you are experiencing with them so that they can learn those emotions. The more responsive you are to the child, the more language they will acquire. And certainly using books. Now, it may be that the kid is not going to be reading the book, but you certainly, can use the book and explore. This is a great book that we found that has some great pictures and a story that you can read to the kid over and over and over again. And the books are really more as a way to establish the context, to begin a conversation. And as Sarah and Christine, and I both know, talking about this topic, this general topic of people safety, is a tough one. But if you're talking about emotions, how you feel, and you're using books like that, then it's not quite so scary. Note too that your child's ability to effectively communicate how they feel enhances their safety by giving them the ability, either verbally or non-verbally or combination, to tell you how they feel after an experience. And that's kind of the key thing, right? How they are feeling after an experience. The experiences that are fun and happy, let's have more of those. But maybe experiences that are scary and painful, they should be stopped and investigated. All right, and that's the critical piece. That's really all we're going here, is giving kids the language tools that they need to tell you how they feel after an experience. If your child cannot communicate how they feel, you cannot know if they're safe. Again, they can communicate just non-verbally, just by their expression, just by their actions. But the more language that they have, the easier it is actually for them to communicate. The more people will actually understand them, the safer that they will be. And note that if you do not know your child is not safe, then you can't prevent them being harmed. So their ability to communicate is a critical element of your knowledge if they are safe or not. Right? And that's the point here. Note too that, particularly for older kids, when kids tell us, as a parent, you don't want to believe it. You don't want to think that someone could be hurting your kid. There is this disbelief. There's this, oh, something must be wrong. The kid can't really, that person can't really be maybe hurting my child. So the first rule is, if you will, is to stay calm, believe the child, try to understand it, and then to investigate it. So the goal here first is to give the child the communication skills that they need, that they can express to you how that they feel after an experience. Note too that your child's safety is also enhanced when they're able to name their body parts. Now, you already do this, right? You already play games with them. I got your nose, I'm tickling your ear, my grandkids, their knees are all, for some reason, particularly ticklers. So I love tickling their knees, I would tickle their knees. So you just name the body parts, guys, as you are tickling them, or as you're cleaning them, or as you're stroking their cheek. And then similarly, when they grab your chin or your mustache in my case, or beard, or your ear, your nose, you name those as well. The day-to-day activities with your children that you have provide you with many opportunities to name their parts and then to name the parts that they touch on you, all right? And that's the goal. Second thing is not only emotions, but also the names for the body parts. The same strategies that you use to help them to acquire the emotions vocabulary is what you use for the body vocabulary, okay? And again, a book that we found that we really like a lot is the Bare Naked book. It's just a fun book that has parts of the body that you can kind of see and engage the children on and read with the kids. And certainly as they get older, it makes more sense. But using these interactions to not only keep them safe, but also build in language and also build in literacy. If your child cannot name or point to the part of the body that hurts, then your ability to understand, why, maybe that they are not, why they are scared, why they are afraid of that person is hindered. And if you don't know why they're upset, then your ability to comfort them and your ability to prevent further harm is diminished. Okay, so again, just as having the vocabulary for emotions, having the vocabulary for body parts allows you to understand what they're feeling, and then to be better, to be safer. Excuse me. Okay, one last language skill that I would like to propose for you guys to be aware of is no. And you can see about the CDC milestone tracker that at age 9 months, they're beginning to understand the concept of no. They're not necessarily expressing it, but they're understanding it. So this is critical, because if you just think back during the course of this past week, how many times you said no to someone? Maybe it's that 10th person has called you on a telephone trying to sell you insurance or a health plan, or to find someone who skipped out on their bills. Maybe it's that person offering you a menu for a restaurant that you don't want to go to. Or maybe it's someone asks you to come in and they want to talk with you, but you're not comfortable of that person or that place, and you said no to. So no is a critical skill, but there's a reality. The reality is that many kids with disabilities don't really know that they have the right to say no. As a result, they become very compliant. They do a lot of stuff without really understanding what they're doing or why they're doing. And this compliance, this just doing what someone tells me to do, makes them really vulnerable, okay? So learning to say no is a critical skill for all of us, but particularly skill for our kids. They need to know they have a right to say no, and then what to do if that right is not respected, okay? So how do we learn no? Well, as you can see by a little girl in the upper right-hand corner, she's made a choice about her dressing for that day, and it's very creative. It's not how I would dress, and it may not how you would have dressed her either, but that's okay. That was her choice. So while toddlers may not get the chance to decide if they brush their teeth or take a bath, sometimes it's just been a couple of days and they really have to take a bath. It's time. We can smell you coming down the hallway. But giving them a choice about, do you want me to read to you, or you want to play with your doll? Giving them choices is critical, and through making choices, they learn they have a right to say yes and no, and also that that their choices will be respected. They learn that their choices matter, and whereas they may not always be happy if you say no to them, you can explain to them, well, this is why, that you have to go to bed now. This is why that, you have to take your bath now, why you have to take the medicine. And Sarah Kennedy, is great about talking about a difference between surprises and secrets, for example. And let's say, for example, your child gets angry with you. I'm going to tell Daddy you said no. Fine, tell Daddy. We don't keep secrets in this house. That's fine. Tell your daddy. So kids then begin to learn, well, I can say no to reading a book or playing a game, but I can't say no about my health. I can't say no about brushing my teeth or going to bed. That's learning when they can say no. And if they don't like it, well, tell your dad, tell your mom. Let's talk about why you have to be clean. But a critical skill. There are a number of books that I used for this presentation, and these books were all had one common author of them, and hopefully she'll pop up here. Very good. Very good. This is Irene van der Zande. Irene is the founder and executive director for Kid Power. And Irene and Kid Power, I would tell you, are the places I go to when I am trying to learn new information. And even in terms of this presentation, this is my copy of the book, and those are my notes. In these books, it talks about that the right to know represents a critical skill for children. Okay? And Irene notes that in saying no, one element is critical is that children should never be required to give affection. Now imagine, it's Thanksgiving or it's Christmas time, and the aunts and the uncles and the neighbors and friends are coming by, and they all want, to hold the kid, tickle the kid, play with the kid. And maybe, the kid doesn't want to go to them. It's critical that they are not made to give affection to someone that they don't want to. You can see by the expression that they don't want to. Give them other ways. They can wave at the kid. They can say hello. They can shake their hand. Many times kids are told by parents, no, give Uncle Joe, a hug. He loves you. Go over there and sit with Uncle Joe. He wants to spend time with you. He's your only uncle. You got to do this. If the kid doesn't want to, then they're being told by the parent, well, you don't have a choice. What you want doesn't really matter here. And maybe the parent's not reading the kid's cues. Maybe Uncle Joe is a fine old guy. Maybe Uncle Joe is not a fine old guy too. Maybe the child has learned from past interactions, I don't want to be with him. And if you force the child to go to him, you're basically also telling the child, not only does your no not matter, you're telling them that Uncle Joe's okay. And that's a really confusing message to give to a kid, particularly if that person is hurting the kid. So it's critical in terms of respecting the child's right to say no, and it's not requiring them to give affection. If you're at a grocery store and you're going down and your kid's sitting in a little basket and that nice old lady comes by, oh, hello, sweetheart, let me just give you a little tickle. And you can tell their child doesn't want to do that. Just explain to them, no, I'm sorry. Mary doesn't really like to be tickled, but she will say hi to you. And this is hard because you have to be willing to stand up for your child. You have to be willing to maybe be socially uncomfortable in order to protect and model for your child that their rights have to be respected. So you got to speak up, okay? Irene also talks about touch and how the touch or play for fun or affection should always be a choice. And in the text that I referenced there, and these are all hyperlinked, it talks about that touch should always be safe. It always should be a choice of each person. It should be allowed by the adult in charge, and it should never be kept secret, okay? The thing about secrets keeps coming back again. Sarah gave a great presentation on this some time ago at a Hands and Voices conference about, in their family keeping surprises, but not secrets. People who hurt our kids groom them to keep secrets. First small secrets and increasingly larger secrets, until the kids really gets confused of, well, whose fault is this that I'm allowing him to do this to me? And I don't like it, but I'm embarrassed, and I kind of didn't stop it, so now it's my fault. But they've groomed them to keep secrets, okay? One of my grandkids is named Tori, and we've been playing tickle for a heck of a long time. But from the very beginning, she's 11 now, I've always told her, you say stop, I stop. And she would say stop all the time just because it was fun to control granddaddy, right? But I used tickle, and I used her saying stop to practice her saying no. And now she has that down pat, and we don't, play tickle anymore, but she knows she has that ability. And then we practice it in other ways, her saying no and having that right. So it's a critical skill. So far, we talked about the language skills for emotions and body parts. We talked about how to say no and the importance of it. We talked about, that touch should always be a choice. We talked about, the parent's skills to observe and to document and to share with others how their child communicates, to ensure that they always are in a nurturing, respectful environment. That people are with their child because they're excited to be with the child, and they're nurturing, and they really want to help that child's development. There's one final piece we have to talk about. We got to talk about the circle of trust. Again, this is a term I took from one of Irene's books recently. But the circle of trust are basically, who are the individuals, be they adults or older children, that you trust your kid to be alone with, that you trust to be in charge of. The kid who is allowed to give your kid a ride to school in their car. Nice teenager down the road, I know him real well, he's always been cool. That person who babysits. The neighbor always seems to have time to be there to help out. Whoever it is, but who do you allow into your circle of trust? Again, in one of the Kid Power texts, Doing Right by Our Kids, and this text is cool because what it talks about is the entire age range, not just birth to 3, but as your kids get older and how that their safety needs change. Obviously, my 11-year-old granddaughter will be dating in a few years, and that's a whole different thing of scary and concern for me, I will tell you, as a grandparent. So that book talks about it, but it talks about the circle of trust being composed of individuals that you give privacy and control to. That is privacy with your child and control over your child. Be they someone babysitting, be it a teacher, be it a grandparent. Okay, it's not a perfect world, guys. I won't go into all the dark part of child abuse and neglect, but simply note that just because someone wants to be with your child doesn't necessarily mean you should trust them. They have to prove that they deserve to be with your child. So who should be in a circle of trust? These are some of the criteria that Irene has put forth in that particular text. Good cleanliness practices. Makes sense. But by same token, if around the house, there's a bottle of pop, maybe a bottle of beer, if the food isn't really kept, clean, or dishes aren't clean, if the food is not really kept in refrigerators, that's not a good sign. They don't maybe deserve your trust. Age-appropriate protection from hazards. If there aren't gates in front of, that hot fireplace, I don't want that kid. If there's a dog there, but the dog isn't restrained, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Clear boundaries established by the parent about touch and teasing and play. You're the parent, you're in charge, we do these things, we don't allow kid to do these things. And if they don't have a good sense of what is appropriate for a 3-year-old, then you shouldn't trust them. Effective and respectful behavior management. What to do if a kid gets upset? If the child starts crying, or maybe the kid takes something from another child. What are the parents' rules for handling that, and do they respect those? Is there always adequate supervision so kids aren't by themselves, not just kids on kids or kids by themselves? And this is important. Do parents always have the opportunity just to stop by, just to make sure it's okay, that you can, without being announced? If not, forget it. Age-appropriate activities. And then this last one, permission for older children to always be able to call. And of course, now kids are kind of growing up with these in their cribs just about, so I'm not sure how old they have to be. But that they always have the right, and you as a parent would practice with them on how to call you when they have a need. Christine, I'm looking at my time, and it's been 45 minutes. Got a few more slides to go. Maybe I can go through them quickly here. Okay. Also, the KIPP Power safety strategies say that you really should research carefully. Don't just assume that because the school hired that person as the bus driver or as a teacher's aide, or maybe as a teacher, that was a good decision. They might just be the only person available that they could hire for that particular job. So what does a school go through as far as checking the credentials of anyone who is entrusted with the privacy and care of your child? Make sure you make those unexpected visits. And if they were upset with you for making unexpected visits, that's their problem. Your child is more important than their unease. That raise any concern, this is hard. You gotta follow your gut, guys. When it doesn't feel right that all of a sudden your child is being given a lot of extra time, a lot of extra attention, even some extra treats being put into their backpack or some extra time off to the side. It doesn't quite seem why my kid is getting special attention than the other kids. Now, that's hard because you want your kid to be successful and liked, but special attention, why? I want your kid to be like all the other kids and have the same amount of attention. And then the last point is that changes start to happen. The schedule, who's involved, where they go, what they do, that's the problem. I provide you with a lot of information. There are highlights or URLs attached. There is 7 KIPP Power strategies that I won't go into because of our time. There are YouTube videos that actually Irene and I recorded some time ago. There are these 7 strategies, and they are captioned that you can watch at your leisure. But in summary, we talked about observing and documenting and sharing how your child communicates. We've talked about teaching your children the vocabulary for emotions and body parts and know and touch. We talked about establishing a circle of trust of people that you give the right to have privacy and control over your time. Note too that if ever you or your child is in a situation that you feel uncomfortable about, that you think maybe that's their safety or your safety, call this number, 1-800-4-CHILD. It's free, it's confidential, it's 24/7. It can be a virtual relay service, it can be a text, or it could be a voice call. You're not reporting someone or yourself as being abused, but saying, I'm seeing something that I don't understand and I'm concerned. And these counselors will help you to understand what you're observing, to help you to figure out what it means, and then what you should do next to be safe. And wouldn't it be great as our kids got older that they knew about this, that they themselves could call this for themselves or for a friend? There's lots of resources here that we don't have time for me to go through. I will tell you that for professionals, that this IFSP and IEP safety checklist and these options here will give you specific information on how to incorporate this information into the educational documents that our kids need and depend on. I will tell you that this is my contact and also Christine's contact if you guys would like to contact either one of us following this. It's my understanding that Christine will share a PDF copy of this presentation with individuals who have registered, that she also will share a URL for the recording of this presentation. And Christine, you want to see if there are, Sarah, if there are questions or comments we would like to address?
Yes, so I'm looking at the chat. I don't know, Sarah, if you have any questions there, but we have about 5 minutes to answer questions. And so I just want to pause to see if there's anyone who's using the interpreter that has any comments or questions. So hold on one moment. Okay. So it sounds as though there are not any questions. So Sarah, do you have? Okay, perfect. All right. I see there's 2. Okay, great. All right. So for those who are still on the call or the webinar, go ahead and send in some questions if you have any. And again, that's through the chat feature at the bottom. While we pause a moment to see if anyone has questions, I wanted to thank Sarah for helping out today on the chat. And again, as I said earlier, she's here from Colorado. Well, not here, but joining us from Colorado. And Harold, thank you so much. As I have, through the years of working with you, every time you share this information is so helpful. So I just wanted to thank you so much. The group of us who are here in the room listening are just like in awe of this really important topic. A lot of the information is pretty basic, but through the lens of child safety is something pretty new to our profession and the work that we do as families. So thank you.
So Christine, we do have a question. The question is, for those of us in the educational system, what's the best way we can ensure that students under our care are safe at home?
In reality, the same information that I share for parents also works for professionals. That is, that being able to effectively understand the child's communication skills, and then to recognize when maybe that if the child is at the classroom and the parent comes into the classroom and the child becomes very anxious, very hypervigilant, very kind of pulling away from them, that's indication maybe that there is a problem. For professionals, I would tell you that I have a whole different presentation. This really more example on the signs and indicators of abuse and neglect. Also on how particularly to interact with a kid that has experienced trauma, which would be maltreatment, and how also to respond when a child conveys to you or even asks you, don't tell anyone, what to do about that. So it certainly is true that the vast majority of the time, the people that are hurting the kids are people either within the family or known and trusted by the family. More often in terms of the abuse, it's more often to be male than female, but it very well can be an older child as well as an older adult. Neglect, when it occurs, is most frequently put on the mom, because usually it's moms that have responsibility for the child, possibly a single parent. But there again, it's a matter of intent. That is, that the parent was more concerned about their own needs as opposed to their child needs, and their neglect put them in danger for injury or for death.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
This is Sarah. I just have a comment. I'm wondering if Dr. Johnson would want to talk about kids with other communication needs besides hearing loss. I just was struck by the idea of really observing carefully in that early development of language age, and just keeping in mind that all behavior is communication.
And the fact that parents or their teacher have the most experience and they have to document. And that sometimes just knowing it yourself is not good enough, but the idea of taking pictures or videos. So for a lot of our kiddos that have additional exceptionalities beyond a hearing loss, their differences in communication will be even larger. And I will tell you guys that the less a child communicates, the more dependent they are upon a few people for their needs, the more at risk they are. So the more that you expand the number of people that can effectively understand the child and respond to them in a way that reflects their emotions, you know, what their wants are, what their fears are, the safer the child will be. So the more involved the kid is, the less mobility they have, the more they require for someone else to help them out with just their basic feeding and clothing and changing, the more at risk they are. So again, the need to particularly to document with pictures or videos how this kid communicates to increase the responsiveness of the environment to that child becomes even more critical.
Oh, that's a huge topic. This is Christine. I just wanted to, I know that we're focusing on children who are ages birth to 3 today, but you know, when we think about the children in our classrooms and the types of placements that they, whether they're in mainstream or a self-contained classroom, you know, as families, we need to be aware of who is communicating with their child and what's the likelihood, you know, the potentiality of risk. So those are other things to also keep in mind when we're talking about placement in particular.
Right.
Well, if there are no other questions, we're just 2 minutes past the hour. I again want to thank Harold, who did an exceptional job culminating all of this information for us today. This really is quite new and up to date. Any other comments from Harold or Sarah?
One last thing for me, if I may. You know, one of the biggest problems we have in this field, this topic, is not a lack of information, but the lack of people who are willing to discuss it, who are willing to learn, who are willing to ask questions, who are willing to have conversations. So I would encourage you to join the Hands and Voices Our Children project to become informed and to go from that progression as we started, from simply being aware of the problem to being able to report the problem, to now being able to hopefully to prevent or respond to the problem, because that's where kids need our help. Not simply saying when they're hurt, but to stop the hurt from occurring. Sarah?
I agree. It's such a great time in our project to really be focusing on prevention, because that we know any kind of maltreatment can cause long-term problems that seem unrelated even through the ACEs study. So I just love that we're focusing on how to build those protective factors for both kids and for their parents.
Great. Well, thank you. And I know that I, as a part of the Our Children Safety Project Learning Community, I'm happy to answer any questions from those who are in our state on when we meet, which is typically this, you know, throughout the school year on the second Tuesday of every month through video conference, Zoom, like today, and it's a great group of individuals, so you'll learn a lot, as I have. So again, I want to thank Harold and Sarah and all of you for joining us today.
Okay.
Thank you.